Absolutely stunning. What poise, what grace by Magnesium Calcium. Here he is at an Oslo training camp, and this is why he does it. This is a game he played against Dimitry Andreikin. It's titillating Tuesday, 20th of August. This is a late round. Will Magnus go on to clinch victory? It's all to come. How does he open the game here? Online chess. Obviously, he pops a pony on f3, one of his favourite pieces. What does Andreikin do in response? The very boring copycat move, also bringing out the pony. Now Magnus pushes the juicer, and how about this? For an overpowered move, he plays banana 5, preparing to fianchetto the bishop on the other diagonal. Incredible chess. Kramnik impressed, and Magnus doesn't go with the obvious bishop to g2, maybe fianchetto in a rook. He plays pawn e3 here, targets that pawn on b5, a6 supports, and now we get the fianchetto. Hits the diagonal here. How does Andreikin respond? Well, he fianchettos his own bishop, a massive bishop cheese string across the board. Castle's now played, e6, and Magnus, one of the most exceptional ways to play. He goes pawn b3, preparing for the double bishop fianchetto. Are we going to see it? It's all to come. Bishop e7 now played, c4, explodes the board, and we see captures. Pawn recaptures, always take towards the centre if you can, and here we see the advance of the c-pawn, taking some central space. Magnus develops the second horsey, making a few neighing noises as he goes. Now we see castles, and always play rook b1, just made that one up. The bishop now defended. d4 from Magnus, and the best move is knight to e4. It opens the pieces. This one can now come to f6, but not played. We see d6. Is Andreikin really a super grandmaster or a very naughty boy? What does Magnus do in response? He goes d5 for the high five. Yasser runs over to give him one, but then pulls out. Does a starts cracking up like the mouth of Sauron, and now we see takes on d5. Magnus recaptures here, the knight developing into the game. Andreikin's got all his bits out before Magnus. He's a happy man, and Magnus now cementos that centre. He's got the space here. How can Andreikin fight back? He goes rook e8. That's where rooks belong. Half open files or open files, and Magnus calmly plays pawn h3 in response. Takes control of g4 and i4. Now a5 played, preparing to bring that bishop into the game, sniping down the diagonal. Magnus anticipates here. My computer's lagging, absolute disaster. We're cracking on, and now we see this sniper hit the long diagonal. Surely Magnus is going to give us that fianchetto. No, he was just teasing. Brings it out this way to target the backwards d6 pawn, and what does Andreikin do? Sidelines his knight. Doesn't he know the classic Russian saying that every schoolboy knows? A knight on the rim is an absolute reprobate with no future prospects that needs to be whipped and flogged with a rusty cat o' nine tails. It translates roughly like that. Well, he puts it there anyway. Magnus now retreats here, and look at this. Bishop d3, a bone in Magnus's throat. He starts choking on camera like that big dude in Gladiator that tries Maximus's soup. But not really, he's just playing. It's not poison general. Magnus having a giggle, moves that rook out the way. He's no longer choking, and now this knight comes back into the game. Andreikin remembers it. He shakes his head, giggling in a way that he couldn't remember it before, and bishop f4 opens the queen. Something wicked this way comes. That's a bad bishop about to be eaten, but no, it's a very good bishop. An active bishop, supported by the most explosive move. Magnus got that one right up in his grill. Not ideal, but you gain something, you give something. These knights start hopping. Keep your eye. Rook b7. This is why Magnus practices. This is why he goes to the Oslo training camps. Look at this knife land on c6. He's got the knife and fork out. Queen and bishop under fire. This one saved, of course. And now Magnus doesn't take on e7. Why give an amazing pony for a bad bishop? This one is staring at its own pawn. So what do we see instead? This one hits c3, sniping at the queen, Magnus making kind of Star Wars blaster noises like he's a stormtrooper, and this one now retreats. What does Magnus do? a4. adding another outpost, banana 5, under his control. Once heard Magnus say he loves an overripe banana. I had a mini banana today here in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, the tiniest banana I've ever seen in my life, but it was quite sweet. Anyway, enough about bananas. Please no rude comments. We now see bishop f8, opening up the cannon. The pawn under fire on e4. Do you want to do f3 right now? Kill this one. Magnus decides no. He hops boldly forth, charging away, and the queen's got no squares on that dark squared diagonal. So it has to come back here, and bang, Magnus gobbles the pawn, makes a big noise as he does so. The rook gets out of dodge, and now you can jump back into that juicy c6 square, or bishop d4 strong. But Magnus doesn't quite find the right construction. They're low on time. He plays knight a7, desperate to gobble up that queen. He does a poker face, hoping Andreikin doesn't notice, but he does. He's a super grandmaster. He sees the attack. He attacks the knight back, and now we see it save itself, supporting its brother. But the a4 pawn is going to be weak. This rook activating like an absolute monster, cutting the connection here, and therefore, after Magnus goes knight b5, this one drops from the board. But Magnus misses a shot. What he could have played here is knight c7. And after the rook saves itself, wow, you shut the trap on that queen. It's got no squares. That's a nice one. Yes, you lose a knight, but this should be good for white here. Sorry, my wrist hurts. I'm at an awkward angle on this laptop. No fun filming in hotels here. Now we go back to the actual game though, because none of that played. Missed by Magnus. He retreats the pony. How meek. Come on, Magnus. You've just been at your training camp. You can do better. The rook saves itself, and now Magnus, absolutely buzzing, takes the ladies off the board. His hands stop shaking. It's like a drug to him, playing a queenless endgame. This is where he starts grinding like a grandma. Big fan of that he is. He even wrote an entire book on it with David Howell. f3 now played. Exposes the king, but it builds a massive conga chain. The bishop at the rear, the knight leading the way. Everyone's having a great time. The music's flowing, but what is this? Knight c5. Something wicked this way comes. Bishop f1, challenging the outpost on d3. That square always reminded me of Kasparov's classic game against Karpov in their World Championship match. And now it's a Far East movement. Like a g6, Dimitry pushes p, and Magnus, so blown away by the overpowered pawn move, the beat of the music, he makes a mistake. He moves the rook, but guess what? He's just left one of his pieces undefended. There's a way to take advantage of it. Can you find the move? It's fairly simple tactics for guys of this level, but missed. This one should have been played. Pawn recaptures, bishop drops, that's the bishop pair for black, and a mangled pawn structure and an exposed king. I mean, that's all but the game, especially with the clock advantage. We run back, it was missed. Knight fd7 played, given the miss. Is that the miss or the blunder? I think the miss. Now we see bishop takes on d3, Magnus liquidating, and surely you take with the knight. An octopus that Stoctopus can be proud of. But then, whoops, misclick, this c4 pawn can get weak. So Dimitry takes with the pawn here, but it allows Magnus to go for this sequence. Hopping with these knights once more, but opening the bishop to hit the knight on c5, and a great move in response, f5. Sure, you lift the king's kimono, but the centre's now under fire. Very difficult to deal with. So Magnus goes for this one, hits the rook, it moves. Now he comes to e6. Now hang on, is it not good to take here? Sort of shatter the structure, keep this one a bit weak? Well, no, because the knight's now stumbling around, and e7, what a move. Bishop g7 natural, but then knight d8. Love this sequence. Amazingly, the knight and pawn forming this barrier, then the pawns running through. Eddie about to become a baby girl. So we run back here. None of that played. Instead, we see takes on e4, pawn recaptures here, and the centre collapses on Magnus, but he takes on c5. Knight takes. These ones go into the blender. All of these pawns do. Bishop d6, targeting this weakened king side here. Rook c2 played. Notice how all the white pieces are on the light squares, you know, apart from a single pawn. No coincidence when the enemy's got the enemy bishop, sorry, dark squared bishop, and Magnus hasn't. Now we see rook f8 played. King g2 on the board and c4. More explosive chess, hitting the rook, saves itself of course. We see this one attacked, these two pawns exchanging for each other, but only after this intermezzo. g3 under fire, Magnus x-ray defends here, and now we see takes. Rook recaptures, rook takes on d5, surely headed towards a draw. No, there's a twist, don't go anywhere. And if you love a bit of epic cheese, don't forget to hit the dislike button, make sure you unsubscribe and never share with any of your friends. h4 played on the board, king g7, king f3, massive check chucked in here, king back to g2, rook d5. We're going to start rattling through a few moves here because the high tension drama is on the way. Knight d8, very tasty move, hitting a few squares here, converging. These knights so tricky in such low time as well. Magnus catching up on the clock. This is where he turns into an absolute beast. Yes, he's a classical monster, but people don't always appreciate just how good he is low on time. Rook e2 played. Now we get rook f7 check. King g8 on the board, rook back to f6, and it's crunch time. That's a double attack. g6, d6, what are you going to do? Dimitry goes slightly the wrong way here. One of the best defensive moves is rook d2, because yes, this pawn drops with check. This one played, that would be illegal. That sends you to chess jail. You have to use your Monopoly card, £50, get out of free. But this holds on to things because now, after the rook's attacked and it saves itself, you can take here and you open up an attack here, this kind of thing. How does the line continue? Like this, like this, like this. Should all be leading to a draw, basically. Anyway, we come back because bishop e7 was played, not rook d2, sets up a big seesaw with the enemy pieces, but now there's this great sequence of check, king here, and now rook e6, supported by the knight on d8, and it's a double attack. So it's forcing off these rooks. Knight recaptures, still technically a draw. Imagine these pawns go into the liquidator, I'm not sure if that's a word, and then you sacrifice this bishop for this one, let's say. Or you swap these ones, leave an h-pawn, stick the king in the corner. Anyway, but you've got some work. You've got to prove it. Magnus checks, starts bringing the king around, and now king f3. You can't actually take off that knight. The engine says it's winning with king captures, but even cleaner, pawn captures. So bishop b8, Andreikin just starts waiting on that diagonal. Magnus brings in the monarch. Now knight e2, he's rotating around, and we see a mistake. You should check from here, or basically bring the bishop to this diagonal or this diagonal, because then when the knight hits d4, you can either take it or you can bring the bishop round and pin that knight. Long story short, you've got to try and chop the knight, and apparently this endgame is holdable with the king round here. You swap h for g-pawn, then you run the king, hide in the corner. Okay, I'm not clicking all the lines deliberately. What we see in the game is bishop b8, and Stockfish here has an absolute meltdown. The bar going to heaven. What do we see now played? Knight d4, only winning move. Look where it's headed. This bishop comes here and a monster check. This one worth a pawn. Gary used to say, Gary Kasparov, well, imagine if you could be 2 pawns ahead and with a knife on f5, that's terminal, and that's why we see resignation here. 2 pawns rumbling through, it's too much. Magnus not only takes this game, but he takes the tournament once more. He also played Hikaru, but they played the boring Berlin endgame. Anyway, really hope you enjoyed. Thanks a lot for watching. I don't know if I can get another video up again this week, maybe, but back in the UK at the weekend. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.